I want to welcome the audience to the show today. My guest today is Eric Altman. And Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I just want to ask you, how did you become interested in this whole Bigfoot phenomena?
I've been doing this for about 45 years now. My interest began when I was about 10 years old, and I was a big fan back in the late 70s, early 80s of the B horror film movies, like the monster movies and stuff like that. And I came across two films that were about monsters, but they claimed to be factual based on true stories. And one of them was Legend of Boggy Creek, film done in 1972 by Charles Pierce, about an upright walking creature that lived in the swamps and bayous around Fouke, Arkansas. The other was a movie called Creature from Black Lake, and that too, it was a fictional film, but it was in the same area, a place called Oil City in Louisiana. And both were about upright walking, hair covered creature that harassed and terrorized these small communities. And the one Legend of Boggy Creek, um, it's stated in the film based on a true story. And apparently it was about these people that lived in this small community in Arkansas that were, as I said, terrorized and harassed by this creature. And the thought of it possibly being monsters, possibly being real, really kind of captivated me. And from there, I went to our public library in Southwest Pennsylvania, where I live, and found a whole section about the subject. And I began to read books about it and tried to start studying the phenomenon. And I found the newspaper archives and found that there were hundreds of sightings in my hometown of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and the surrounding areas. So I started to study and educate myself and read all about anything I could find on the subject, just because of the possibility that monsters might be real. So I spent my first good maybe 10 to 15 years really studying the subject and educating myself on it, learning as much as I possibly could through books, newspaper articles, magazine articles, any kind of television program that might be out there on it, like Leonard Nimoy's In Search of, and that sort of thing. And it was probably when I was around 26, 27 years old, I decided to start looking into these reports and cases to see if there was any legitimacy to them. And back at that time in the mid 90s, there weren't a lot of people doing this. There weren't a lot of people investigating and talking to eyewitnesses. So in my state, I think there was maybe three other people doing it at the time. So I kind of jumped on it and kind of took off from there.
You have been doing it a while, but I can imagine for a 10-year-old boy, seeing the Falk Monster film could really have an impact on, and saying that it was a true story. And I've talked to a lot of those people down there, and yeah, it seems as if that was a real incident that happened to these people, and very, very scary.
Yeah, Charles Pierce, who did the film, who created and directed and filmed the movie, he based a lot of the encounters on real people's experiences. As a matter of fact, he had some of the family members in the film, like Smokey Crabtree, Travis Crabtree, some of the other Crabtree brothers and cousins and whatnot, and they were all experiencing these things, this creature roaming around mobile homes and houses and tormenting and harassing people. And at that time, there wasn't much publicity about it because it really wasn't making headline news. The stories were getting out in the Texarkana Gazette and some of the local newspapers around the area, but it really wasn't out there mainstream until Charles Pierce heard about it. He wanted to make just a horror film, and he heard about this case going on in Fouke, Arkansas, and decided he'd look into it. And sure enough, he was able to find eyewitnesses, and he created this film that he called a docudrama. And basically, that was, as the film says, based on a true story. There were reenactments and witnesses, testimony, and interviews and stuff like that. So it was a really cool movie. But again, it was based on, you know, a true story. So a lot of the things that happened, he filmed in the movie actually happened.
Yeah, the way I understand this one property, they were having this Bigfoot come up, and even at one point, one of them stuck his hand in through a window or something. And I mean that you don't hear of that very often. So that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, that was actually the first encounter that actually happened. In the movie, they put it as the last encounter, but that actually was the first experience. And yeah, it was a husband and wife and a brother and a couple other people that rented this house. And they had worked on a cattle farm. The two older brothers worked on a cattle farm not far away. And as soon as they moved in, literally 2 or 3 days later, this animal showed up and started harassing the people that were in the house at night while the other gentlemen were away working. And yeah, it did stick its arm in one of the windows. And Bobby Ford, one of the brothers, was supposedly attacked by this creature. It kept coming onto the porch. It was trying to get into the house. And finally, when the older brothers came home from work, they had guns, went out and saw this thing on the property, and they shot at it, supposedly knocking it down. And in the house, the wives and girlfriends were all upset and scared and screaming. So they sent Bobby back to the house to kind of check on them, if you will, make sure they were okay. And as he just about got to the front porch, the creature attacked him. And it didn't do serious damage to him. It put a big scare in him and shocked him that he actually burst through the front door and was rushed to a hospital in Texarkana, where he was diagnosed as being in shock from the experience. But that was actually the first real experience that kind of kicked off this wave of sightings in Fouke, Arkansas.
Yeah. And I understand the house had been vacant until they moved in. So I wonder if Bigfoot maybe had taken ownership somewhat of that territory and that home. And when they moved in, it was just they didn't really want them there.
It's hard to speculate what caused the creature to come around, but once it made its presence known after that experience the family moved out a few days later, and it began to terrorize other residents of the Fouke area.
Yeah. I understand they have kind of a festival now, kind of Bigfoot festival down there, and a lot of names show up, and a lot of people talk about Bigfoot for a few days.
Yeah, the Boggy Creek Festival, I think it's in its fifth or sixth year now, and it's
Hmm.
become pretty popular. Now, the ironic thing is Fouke is not a big town. There's about maybe 700 to 800 people, 700 to 800 residents that live in and around Fouke, so it's not a bustling, metropolis. They've got, I think, a hotel, a gas station or two. They have the Monster Mart in town, which is a famous grocery store slash museum they set up in honor of the Fouke monster. And they've got a couple other small things around the area that, um, like, I think they have a Family Dollar down there and a few other little small things like that. But that's, it's not a big town. So these people weren't looking for publicity. They were not looking to have their names in the paper. They were just going through a terrifying encounter.
Yeah, and I understand the hospital verified that this person had experienced something that probably was quite out of the ordinary because he was in shock.
Yeah, they did confirm that he was treated for shock, although they never really released why he was treated for shock. I don't think they kind of bought into that story that he was attacked, but the local constable down there did confirm that yeah, he was in shock and he went out and investigated. Matter of fact, they did a several day investigation around the property, and although they found some strange footprints, they never found any other evidence of the creature being around or even being shot at.
The way I understand, the family moved after that.
Yes. Yeah, about 3 days after it happened, they moved out.
I can't say that I blame them.
No, I can't either. To have something sticking its arm in the window and trying to grab at you or trying to come in through the front door or attacking poor Bobby Ford like it supposedly did, yeah, it would give me a reason to move out too.
Well, you've been around this subject a really long time, and that is unusual. I mean, I've done a lot of interviews, and I don't hear of too many cases where Bigfoot is that close to a home. They sometimes slap the outside of a house, but to come into that kind of close contact and be that aggressive, I don't hear of that much. How about you?
There's been a few cases in Pennsylvania where it's come around a property, looking in the windows, not reaching in the windows, but looking in the windows. There's a case from the Superior Mobile Home Court in the 1970s, I want to say 73, where a creature was reportedly ripping up the electrical line to a mobile home and pulled basically the line that ran into the house completely out of the ground, causing power to go out. There's been some other cases similar to that, but nothing to the extreme that the Fords went through in Falk.
Sure. So what after you were introduced to this subject and you had this, kind of wanted to know more, what was your first the first aha moment that you had in the research that you were doing?
Um, that's a good question because I've had so many aha moments.
Well, just share them all with us.
Yeah, I think maybe hearing the sounds in the woods, investigating some cases. One of the first cases I looked into happened in 1988 in southwestern Pennsylvania, outside a little town called Ligonier, Pennsylvania, which sits on the eastern side of the Chestnut Ridge in southwestern PA. And a gentleman by the name of Sam Sherry went out there one night in May to do some fishing, night fishing. And when he arrived at it's a spillway along the Loyal Hannah Creek, and there's areas to park, and a lot of people fish right there in the spillway. And he went out there that night to fish by himself. And once he arrived, he had heard something in the woods that he described as sounds he had never heard before, like monkey chattering, whistling, and just grunts and strange noises. And as he was about to get set up with his rods and reels to fish, he saw this thing come out of the tree line to his left, right along the edge of the Loyal Hannah Creek. And it was probably about maybe 100 feet away from him. And he saw this thing. He didn't know what to make of it. He turned to walk back towards his car, and almost instantaneously, this thing was so quick it was right up on top of him. And he said it was so fast that he felt it brush by him, and he only taken like one or two steps. He got into his car, and this thing would not let him leave. It was pushing down on the open window of his vehicle. Now, this is in 1988, so he had an older type vehicle. And if you remember, we had the roll down windows back at that time. There was starting to come out with the electric windows, but mainly there were roll down windows. And sure enough, that's what he had. And his window was down. It was a hot evening, and this thing literally was pushing down on the driver's side window, and it stuck his head in the window, was face to face with Sam, and it was spitting on him, breathing. And he had about enough of it. He honked his horn, which caused the creature to step back for a moment. And that was Sam's chance to get out of there, which he did. He drove off. And weirdly enough, as Sam was driving away, he said this thing, he could still see it in its tail light standing there. And it almost appeared like it was reaching out, waving goodbye to him as he left. Um, that was one of the probably first cases I looked into. And I spent a lot of time getting to know Sam. He was an older gentleman when I met him, probably in his 70s. And we spent a significant amount of time up on the ridge together, hiking trails and exploring, and him showing me areas that he had hiked and investigated for Bigfoot sightings as well. And one day while we were out in the woods, we had heard some really unusual sounds that I've never heard before in my life. And I've been a hunter and outdoorsman for a long, long time. So this was the first time I'd heard anything like that. And it was just captivating. And the thought of possibly hearing a Bigfoot or something unknown was just one of those, probably the very first aha moment that I had.
Going back to the incident that he had with Bigfoot in the head in the window and all that, I know in those days people weren't looking to get like the oil samples from the hair or hair samples or anything like that. But did this thing leave any marks on the automobile or any evidence in the car at all?
Sam told me, like I said, it had its head in the window, and as it was breathing, it was spitting on him. And of course, Sam's just an outdoorsman. He's a fisherman, hunter. He lives in the mountains up there, and he never really thought to collect any of it. He never thought to look for any evidence on his car. So if there were handprints or hair, spit, saliva, anything like that, he never thought to collect any of it. He just wanted to get out of there, and he did. Unfortunately, by the time I met Sam, it was probably in 1997. So, like I said, he was in his 70s when I met him. His car was long gone by that point, so I was not able to look at it or examine it for anything like that.
Was this an isolated experience he had up there, or were there other Bigfoot experiences he had?
That was the first that he had. He had told me he had some other experiences. Now, just for your listeners to understand, the Chestnut Ridge that I talked a little bit about, it's in southwestern Pennsylvania, and it runs through three counties from southwestern PA into northwestern West Virginia. And there have been Bigfoot sightings up through that area for a long, long time, probably going back, as far as I'm aware, maybe over 100, maybe 200 years of documented reports. And Sam lives right at the base of the Chestnut Ridge, so he spent a lot of his time up there hiking and hunting. And after he had his experience, he literally sought out this thing. He went looking for it, and he had some other experience as well where he had heard things, heard strange cries and sounds. I was with him when we heard the one that one time. But he had a second sighting that he claimed was a white female with almost a dirty white salt and pepper type of hair. And he had seen it while he was hiking a trail. He came around a rock outcropping, and it was behind the rock outcropping, and he startled it. And I guess it took off down through the woods, and he only saw like from the waist up, the torso, the arms, the shoulders, and the head running away from him. So he never got a look at the face, but he did say he saw breast on this thing as it kind of ran off in a direction away from him. That's the only other sighting I know that he experienced something, but he claimed to have cast several tracks over the years. He when he passed away, his wife gave me two of his footprint castings that he had made, and I in turn donated them to a paranormal museum out in eastern Pennsylvania for them to put on display. But as far as other sightings that I know, the white female Bigfoot that he claimed he saw was the only other one I'm aware of.
Now, that area where he had these sightings, is that an area you have personally researched yourself as well?
Oh yes, I've been researching. I live about 15 miles to the west of the Chestnut Ridge, so I'm up there frequently. I hike. I've camped up there. I've investigated cases as well as proactively going out and spending time in the woods, all up and down the ridge itself, from Indiana County all the way down through Fayette County. I've spent hundreds of hours, if not maybe thousands of hours, out there in the woods hiking and sitting out at night and doing observation outings and whatnot. Um, I've heard some weird things up there. I found footprints in that area. I've never had a sighting in that area, but I've seen eyes shine that could have been a creature, and I've had some other strange experiences as well. But yeah, that area is very active to this day. And as I said, I have a documented newspaper report of a wild man encounter that goes back to the late 1800s.
So they're not new to the territory.
No, not at all.
What kind of sounds did you hear? You said you had some unusual sounds that you'd heard up that way.
Yeah, a couple, most of them were different types of sounds. I've heard high pitching, like a squealing sound or a high pitched scream, if you will, on several different occasions. I've heard low grunting, and a couple of times I've heard what sounds to be like people talking, but you can't understand what they're saying. It's almost like a conversation's going on, but it's a mumbling type of conversation, like they're something speaking to is something else and they're talking but you can't understand it.
I've heard
um
that quite a bit, where there is this sound. Sometimes it's not even, you can barely even tell that it's a conversation possibly going on, but sometimes there is a distinction between, maybe a lower male voice and a slightly higher pitched female voice. Have you heard anything like that?
I've only heard what sounds like male individuals talking, and at the time we heard them we thought people were coming towards us, like hunters or outdoorsmen hiking in the woods. It was just like a normal conversation. You could hear people talking back and forth, but you couldn't make out what they were saying, and even if they got closer to us you still couldn't understand what they were saying. It was almost like they were mumbling. They were speaking, but it was gibberish. You couldn't understand what the language was. And I was out with several people that have also witnessed that at the same time. So we have no idea what it was. We didn't see what made the sounds or had the conversation. We just heard it.
And could you tell? I know it's difficult to tell how far away, but did it seem really distant, or did it seem like it was on the other side of the bush?
When the one example that we heard was a few years ago in Fayette County, and we had parked our vehicles. We had just gotten our equipment set up for the night. We weren't there more than half an hour, and we heard somebody or something, I should say, walking through the woods talking to each other, and they were approaching us. I probably would say a couple hundred feet away, but they were close enough that we could hear a conversation going on, and they probably got maybe within 50 feet of us. And it's at night, so we had thermal FLIR out, we had night vision, high-powered flashlights with high looms, and we saw nothing. The conversation basically stopped when it got really close to us. It just came to an abrupt end. So we have no idea what it was or where it went. There was really no sound to indicate something went running off or tromping away in the brush. It just stopped. And I don't have an answer for that. I have no idea what it was. And the people that were with me were kind of scratching their head at that one too.
Yeah, there's a lot of unusual phenomena that goes on with Bigfoot. I can say that, the strange things that you can't explain, all of it. Have you ever had anything unusual that was, I mean, more unusual than that?
Oh yeah, we've had some really strange things going on in areas where there's been Bigfoot sightings and activity. I can't correlate the two to Bigfoot, but we've seen, I guess people call them earth lights or ghost lights or spirit lights in the forest. I've seen them on multiple occasions darting through the trees. And this is in December, January when there's no fireflies or lightning bugs out. There's no source for a light that we could find. You just simply see a light for a few seconds as it's kind of flickering through the trees, then it would be gone. And part of my research team, they too have experienced lights where they've seen them almost like within 5 feet of them and they just disappear. We have heard, as I mentioned, the strange language. I'll share this case with you. This was pretty interesting. This happened in 2021. I was on the Chestnut Ridge in Fayette County, and it was probably about 11 o'clock at night. I was out with two other research partners of mine, and we had set up on the top of this ravine where a few years, probably about 5 to 10 years earlier, there had been a lot of activity, sightings, and reported encounters, probably within a mile and a half to 2 mile radius. And we were set up on this old backcountry road and a little pull-off area. And across the road was this very deep, dark ravine that went down probably a couple hundred feet. And we were trying to do some calls to get a response or to bring something in that might be curious. And we were doing mimicking what these animals are thought to do. They call it a primate whoop call. And we were trying that. And in the same ravine we were doing the call as we were standing over, male human voice answered me, and it didn't do the high pitched whoop. It just said like my voice. It said whoop, and it kind of stopped me. And it was another one of those aha moments that really kind of it shook me up because I was not expecting anything to come out of this dark ravine. I saw no flashlights. I heard nobody moving around, and it wasn't an echo. It just sounded like a male person, a human being, answering me to the calls that I was making. But I was doing like a high pitched whoop, like trying to imitate a primate. And this thing answered in a male low voice. And that was just one of those holy crap moments. What the heck was that? And we never did have an answer. We tried to get down in the ravine, very dark, very steep, very dangerous. Even with flashlights at night, it wasn't safe to try to get down. But there was something down there at the bottom of that ravine that answered me back, and I still to this day don't know what it was.
Yeah, it's amazing how elusive these things can be sometimes, where you have the sound or you have, a flash of them here, there, and everywhere, and then you cannot locate, the actual Bigfoot, even though they seem fairly close sometimes. So,
Yeah, that seems to be the case.
yeah, exactly. So, but you have had an actual physical sighting of Bigfoot, is that right?
I have not. I've seen what I call possible Bigfoots, and I'm not saying they were or not. I don't know what it was. I had one at Salt Fork State Park in Ohio, in Cadiz, Ohio, just outside of Columbia. Um, I went out there with, I was invited by a researcher by the name of Don Keating, And he invited myself and some other people to investigate a property just outside the park where the family was having things come around their house almost on a nightly basis and making strange sounds. And this is before we really had good quality digital recorders. He was using a baby monitor and leaving the baby monitor outside on his porch, and then had the baby monitor up against a cassette recorder where he was recording these really unusual sounds, nothing like I had ever heard before or any of the researchers. So I got invited out on a weekend. It was the first weekend in October 2008, and we concluded our investigation there probably about midnight. And myself and another researcher, his name was Mike. We decided to go back to the park and just drive around the park, check out a couple of the picnic areas where there had been previous sightings over the years, and see if we could stir anything up. And sure enough, we got out to what's called the handicap picnic area. It was probably about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning when we got there. Nobody else was there. No vehicles were parked in the parking lot. We saw nobody at the pavilion. There was nobody at the picnic tables. It was just us, Mike and I. And when we first arrived, we heard something down in a ravine away from us. And I couldn't even guess how far it was, but it sounded like something was moving around. You could hear branches snapping, brush breaking. We just assumed it was a deer moving back and forth through the brush. We were there for a little while. The noise stopped, and we decided to go to a different location in the park, which we did. And at that other location, we had heard, the only way to really describe it is something yelled off a wooded hillside, and it stirred up a pack of coyotes, which got really upset, and they started yipping and barking and howling and carrying on. Then everything went quiet. It was quiet for probably the next half an hour. This is going on 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning now. And we decided, well, let's hit the handicap picnic area one more time. We heard something up there. Maybe we might get lucky, and who knows. So we drove back up, and I parked my vehicle behind the handicap picnic pavilion where my high beams, my headlights would be facing straight ahead into the picnic area where you could see all the picnic tables and a little small gazebo at the far end. And we parked, turned the car off, turned the lights off, and we started walking into this picnic area. And we hadn't made it more than maybe 30, 40 feet in, and we both heard something hit the ground. And it was large, it was heavy, and it bounced a couple times. I did not see it. I heard it hit the ground, but Mike says he saw it. He claims it was the size of a couch cushion. A rock, as he said, hit the ground and bounced, so we both heard it. Mike freaked out, and he turned and tried to make a beeline back to the car, and in the process almost knocked me over. I'm standing there. I'm like, this is what we're here for. This is why we're out in the woods. Well, Mike is back at my car trying to get the car door open. And I have a habit of locking my car doors no matter where I go. If it's out, in the park, if it's wherever, I always lock my car door. So he's trying to get me to let him in the car. So I went back to the car, and he's yelling at me, let's go, let's go, let's get out of here. Something threw a rock at us. Something doesn't want us here. So we proceeded to get in the car, and I had a really powerful spotlight with me at that time. I had it in the front seat. And we started to back the vehicle out of the parking area with my high beams on, and I was backing out to my left where the front of the vehicle would have swung to the right. And to the left of the handicap picnic area, there was a line of briars and brush about 4 feet high. And for like maybe 2 to 3 seconds, my high beams swept across the front of something as it stood up. And what it was, I have no idea, but it wasn't leaning forward, it wasn't crouching down. It just stood straight up. And I got a eye reflection, eye shine of light. I guess you call it whitish blue reflection. And when I realized what I had saw, I stopped the car and yelled at Mike, "Oh my God, did you just see that?" And of course, Mike was still freaking out about the rock. He wasn't paying attention. He said, "No, I didn't see anything." So I pulled my vehicle back in, and I lined my high beams right on that section of briars and brush, and there was nothing there. I jumped out with the spotlight I had on the front seat with me, and I shined it all throughout that picnic area. There was nothing there, no sounds, no noises, just nothing. So the next morning, we went back to the lodge and went to sleep for a little while. And I got up about 8 o'clock, went back up there again by myself. And sure enough, behind that 4 foot high brush briar patch was this huge area of matted trampled grass that led away from the briar patch down the ravine into the wooded area and disappeared. You couldn't follow the grass being trampled anymore. So there was something there. I saw something rise up from behind this 4 foot briar patch. I saw what looked to be two large whitish blue eyes reflecting back, but it happened so quickly. Like I said, 2 to 3 seconds at most. And when I realized I saw something, it was gone. I have no idea what it was. I don't even know if it was a person. It could have been, but this thing was pretty tall, whatever it was. And that's probably one of the few experiences where I've seen something that I can't explain.
About how often are you able to get out and do research?
I haven't been able to get out much this year. Right now I'm caring for a pretty sick dog, so I haven't had much of the opportunity to get out this spring or even into early summer. Normally I get out as much as I'm able to, and sometimes that's 3 or 4 times a month on weekends, depending on what my job lets me. We've gotten out in the past, we've gone out for days at a time, um, camping and hiking. I used to get out every weekend and spend hours in different locations, sitting out in the woods at night for hours on end. But as I get older now, I can't do the hiking I used to do. My knees are pretty much shot. So now I have to drive to an area, hike a little ways into an area that's dark and I know has a good place to sit and set up posts and observe. So that's what I do now. But unfortunately, this year, like I said, I have a sick dog that I've been caring for that I haven't had a chance to much to get out this year. But in the past, I was out constantly.
Well, I can appreciate that. I had a little dog that I took care of for a long time, and you just have to stay with them at a point.
Yeah, yeah. I have a Pomeranian. With the neurologist thinks he might have a brain tumor, so I've been kind of keeping track of him, making sure he gets his anti-seizure medication and his prednisone to keep the swelling down. And so he's doing okay so far, but if the prognosis is true, it's not a good one. So I've been devoting a lot of my time just to taking care of him and making sure he's okay.
I can totally relate um, to that. So, in your experience out in the woods, have you run across any of the structures that I hear so much about?
Yeah, I've seen some really strange structures. If you want to call them TP shaped structures, basically branches leaned up against a tree. Um, in Clearfield County in south central Pennsylvania, back in 2008, a member of my research team found the beginnings of what looked like something was building a large hut way out in the middle of the mountain, with no trails around. They just decided to walk off trail, and they came across this area where something had pulled all these saplings down into like a center focal point in a round circle, and they weren't tied off or anything, but they were pulled down. It almost looked like something was getting ready to build some kind of structure. It was just impressive to see. And we've seen some of the small TPs. We One area we found, myself and another research partner, we found maybe 50 to 75 of these small little TPs where sticks were put together in a TP formation. We go back up a week, 2 weeks later, and they'd be completely gone. There'd be no signs of them at all. I'm not one that really subscribes to the possibility that Bigfoot leaves markers and X's and tree things. I've seen a few. I don't know what they mean or what any kind of meaning they come from them, but I have seen them. Um, I'm not aware of anything with the exception of one case where people have actually witnessed Bigfoot building these or making these markers. So I don't really subscribe to them much, but I have seen them.
Sometimes I've heard people talk about nests that they could see that there was something that was built maybe to leave a young one in or something like that. Have you seen anything like that?
I have not seen the bedding nests. I know they found them in the Olympic National Park out in Washington State along the coast. Um, there have been other people that have found them around different parts of the country. They look like just a bedding area that something's brought in leaves and twigs and branches and um, fir branches from pine trees and all kinds of things to make a nice, comfortable bed. And I know those have been found. I've never personally found them myself.
What do you think about the Sierra sounds? I'm sure you've heard them, and how do they compare with some of the sounds that you have heard?
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up because the sounds that I heard were very similar. Um, the ones that Ron Moore had collected and Alan Berry back in the early 1970s in the Sierra Mountains, they're fascinating. I don't know what they are. I know from speaking with Ron on the recordings multiple times that he's firmly well convinced that they're not from a human and no known animal. He's had them tested by a variety of different colleges and audio places that have looked into them. What is on that tape wasn't exactly what we heard, but pretty similar because the language that's captured on those recordings, it's gibberish. It's not, it sounds like some kind of language, but it's not anything that we're aware of. It's not like Chinese or Russian or French or English or anything like that, even Native American. They're just guttural, gibberish sounds. And it kind of reminded me when we did the mumbling sounds, it kind of reminded me of the Sierra sounds. Although, like I said, they weren't that clear and they weren't that defined. It was just mumbling.
Well, I know when I interviewed Scott Nelson, the linguist who has slowed them down and really analyzed them rather thoroughly. And you really had to hear them at a slower pace because they speak so rapidly.
Mhm. Yeah, I have not heard Scott's recordings being slowed down. And to be honest, I've never taken the recordings and tried slowing them down myself. Um, I just find them fascinating, but I'm not a crypto linguist, so even slowing them down, it probably wouldn't do me much good because I can't understand what they're saying and probably couldn't be able to pick out any kind of language or um, verbs or consonants or adjectives, anything like that. I can make no sense of those sounds.
Well, he doesn't know what they're saying, but he was able to look at it closely enough to determine that there was definitely some form of a language going on there. If you get curious about it, go check out on my YouTube channel, Bigfoot the Language. That was the very first release that I had, and it really describes it well, and all of that is in there, and slowed down, and you can actually he describes how he analyzed it. So it's a really fascinating thing. That was kind of my introduction into Bigfoot, and it was kind of diving into the deep end of the pool to hear that first thing. But very fascinating, very interesting. What do you think about the DNA studies that have been done out there on some of the hairs and some of the oil substance, I guess, on the skin?
I think the one that was done by Oxford University, Brian Sykes did that one a few years back. I think that was a good, thorough study. Some of the others that have come out, I'm not so sure about. Um, I really don't get too much into what the community's doing or what other people are doing. I concentrate on my stuff. So although I was familiar with what was produced and some of the reports that were put out there on different DNA studies, I didn't get too deeply involved in it, simply because I'm a citizen scientist. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a wildlife biography background, or I should say wildlife biologist background. I don't know much about the DNA, how it's studied, what can be taken from it. So I'm a layman, very much so a layman, and I just kind of, hear about it. People talk about it. Oh, that's great. Okay. Did it prove anything? No. Well, okay, let's move on to the next thing. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was with it.
They don't have anything to compare it to, I understand. So it becomes really difficult to say. They can say, well, this isn't any known thing, but we don't know what it is. So they can't compare it. What do you think they are? What do you think Bigfoot is?
Uh, I wish I could answer that. I really don't know at this point. When I first got into this many years ago, I was convinced 100% that these were relic hominids, something that kind of survived from prehistoric ages, whether it be Paranthropus or Gigantopithecus. I thought that's what we were dealing with because they do kind of fit that description. But as time's gone on and I've continued to investigate, I'm not sure what these things are because they're obviously highly intelligent. We have not found any fossil remains or even remains of a dead one that just died in the forest. So I'm not sure what they are. I have no idea, and I'm not going to try to speculate as what they are. I just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of there, right there with you. I don't either. Um, the Native American legends, I mean, there's so many of them that talk about, the keeper of the forest, the Sasquatch, the Stone Man. I mean, it just goes on and on, the various names that they have for what we would call what I call Bigfoot. But they also said that they were kind of live between two worlds, kind of a spirit world and a physical world.
Yep.
Have you heard of any of those Native American stories, and what do you think of those?
Yeah, here in Pennsylvania, the Lenni Lenape tribe that kind of moved over into the Delaware Valley in New Jersey, they were out throughout central and eastern PA for a while, and they have in their lore a being that some Bigfoot researchers will equate to being a Bigfoot. It's called the Missing or Missing Wing, and this was supposedly a protector of the forest. It was described as a tall, hair-covered creature that would be able to move through water sources from our world to its world in the sky. This thing would show up in times of environmental disasters or environmental destruction. Like if there was a logging crew out there cutting down a part of the forest, the thing would show up to protect the forest and try to scare people out of the woods. But yeah, the Lenape tribe looked at this thing as more of a spirit being rather than a physical being. And it was a protector of the woods, protector of the animals. And they have believe it's still there, but I'm not 100% certain. They had a museum up in the northeastern part of the state near the Poconos where they had a museum. They had one of these Missingwees or Missing Holocons, as they're called, um, in their museum. And it looks like a Bigfoot if you look at it. But I think that's why some researchers have grabbed onto the story from the Lenape tribe and said, yeah, they're talking about a Bigfoot. Whether or not, it depends on who you ask. But that's one of the tribes that I'm familiar with, especially in my home state, that have legends and stories about these spirit beings or creatures that resemble man but are covered with fur.
It's interesting that you said that that legend held with it that they would come when the forest was maybe being destroyed or cut down, because I've heard so many stories about loggers, and they'll be logging out the big trees and Bigfoot shows up and tries to kind of destroy their camp, just kind of get rid of them, but it
Mhm.
scares them off, and the logging companies have a hard time keeping people employed because they get a little concerned and worried about Bigfoot showing up all the time.
Yeah, there's a great story that's written by Marion T. Place, and I think the title of the book is Bigfoot All Over the Country. And in that particular book, if I might be mistaken, but there is a story about a logging camp out in the Pacific Northwest where um, the husbands, wives, the kids that were staying at this logging camp, they had tents set up and everything like that. And this Bigfoot literally came in and terrorized them so much to the point where they put together a posse with rifles and torches, went out looking for this Bigfoot. And unfortunately, several of the men were killed. And eventually, the creature did scare the camp away, that all the people in the camp scared them away. But I think that's in Marion T. Place's book, Bigfoot Around the Country. It's a fascinating story. I read that when I was probably in my teens, like 12 or 13 years old.
Well, it fits with the idea that they are here to protect the forest, to protect the
Yeah.
woods and stuff. What do you think of the Patterson-Gimlin film?
I'm still on the fence about that. Um, and the reason being is, I mean, it's a film. It's hard to reproduce. I mean, other people have tried, other people have claimed it, but it's just a film. It doesn't present us a body or a specimen for us to study. It's a fascinating film that Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin took back in 1967. If I would have to say there was one definitive piece of footage out there that would show what could be a Bigfoot, that would be it. Um, Again, I don't know if that's a Bigfoot in it or not. I don't know what's in the film, but it's nothing like I'm familiar with, not a human. I just don't know what it's in it. And even today, after almost 60 years of study and celebrating it and new advancements coming out to enhance and stabilize and clear up the video. there's still a lot of debate about it. People argue back and forth that it's real, it's not real, it's fake, it's not fake. Well, the folks, John Chamberlain from Planet of the Apes supposedly made the costume, and they go to John Chamberlain and those folks at the special effects department, and they said, no, we never made that. We could if we wanted to, but no, we didn't make that. Disney was even contacted and asked if they made that suit, and they denied it. So I'm on the fence about it. I think it's a really cool piece of footage. I know Bob Gimlin personally. I've known him for many years. I don't think the man is lying when he recounts his experience and what they saw that day, but I just don't know what's in that footage.
Sure, absolutely. Um, do you think that Bigfoot travels through like waterways or things like that? What's your thought on that?
I think, and this is going to be a little bit of a stretch for some people, but I think Bigfoot is attracted to not only waterways, but electrical sources, and waterways can be used as an electrical source. And what I mean by that, like an energy source, I should say. There have been so many sightings over the years along clear-cut areas for gas lines and power lines, and around cell phone towers and waterways, whether it's lakes, rivers, streams. It always seems to have these sightings that are occurring around these energy sources. And I didn't think much of it until I really started putting together the data that I was collecting, that other Pennsylvania researchers were collecting, and that's what we started to find. Sure enough, we go out to investigate a case, and right across the street, maybe down a little ways from the house where the sightings took place or the activity took place, is a cell phone tower or electrical power lines where the creature was seen crossing the road. Um, the waterways, I think if it is an animal, which I'm pretty sure that it is, I just don't know what kind of animal it is. They are going to have to eat, they're going to have to drink, and that's probably why they're seen around the waterways or even energy sources. Maybe the energy sources are drawing in other animals, and that's how they're feeding. I really couldn't answer for sure, but we're seeing that kind of pattern show up.
Sometimes people measure radioactive kind of material around where a Bigfoot has been seen. Have you heard of that, or what do you think of that?
Yeah, I know some paranormal researchers who've got into the cryptid studies of Bigfoot and other cryptids, and they take EMF detectors out there, electromagnetic field meters, and Geiger counters, and different types of things that take measurements, magnetometers, and they've tried to collect energy readings, whether it be an EMF field or a radiation field or whatever. I don't know if they've been successful or anyone's documented large alarming numbers of these fields collected. I've tried it myself. Just figured out of right out of the box, why not try it and see what we can find? And we've collected some very high EMF readings in the woods where there shouldn't be EMF, but I can't say that's correlated to or related to a Bigfoot. It's just one of those weird things that happens out in the woods.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you can't. I mean, you can say, yeah, they both happen at the same place, but you don't know if they actually are caused by one or the other. That's
Right.
absolutely true. It seems like some people have reports. Maybe this is a more current thing. I'm not sure of Bigfoot coming into more of areas that have more populated areas, and they do dumpster diving and hunt for food and find food. Have you ever researched an area that was a little bit more populated?
Oh yeah, a lot of the sightings have taken place in more populated areas. We had a really wild case back in 2009, and the city is called Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and it's a pretty large city in southwestern Pennsylvania, not the size of Pittsburgh, but one of the larger cities in the southwestern corner. And a woman contacted another Bigfoot research group, and because it's in my area, I was contacted by that researcher, and he relayed me her information, and I called her and she relayed her encounter, which was really fascinating. Now, Uniontown sits at the base of the Chestnut Ridge, which we talked a little bit about earlier. And she was driving home from work one night on a Friday evening about 5:30, 6 o'clock. It's a very populated area. People are outside. It's the summer months. People are out on the porches. They're grilling and barbecuing. And she's driving along this road coming out of the downtown area before it starts to get more country and more rural. And as she's driving along, she's passing an elementary school on her left and a Rite Aid drugstore on her right. And she's following the speed limit, which is 25 miles an hour. She happens to look over to her left, just glancing, and she sees what she thought at first was a person running at her car, and coming in almost in a direct line of the way she was traveling. So she thought for sure this thing was going to impact her car. So she came to a stop right at the side of the curb, right at the parking lot of the Rite Aid. And sure enough, this thing jumped off a high wall from the elementary school yard, ran right out into the road towards her car. And instead of jumping over the front of the car, it jumped over the trunk of her car. She watched it run into the Rite Aid parking lot and down this very busy street where other people were out and doing their things with their family, and disappeared from sight. And when she told us her story, she told us how it jumped over, it almost vaulted over the back trunk of her vehicle. And sure enough, when we inspected the trunk of her vehicle, we found what almost looked like very either something with very coarse hair or even a hairbrush would have brushed against that right rear quarter panel in the trunk. And it wasn't just like one or two lines, this was a whole bunch of lines. Sure enough, like she described, it almost looked like something jumped across and drug its hair or scraped the back of the trunk. So it wasn't definitive proof, but we found it compelling, enough so that we started monitoring this area. I had a conversation with a store clerk and a manager at the Rite Aid, asking them if they were aware of anything. They have security cameras. I said, "Hey, did you catch anything on your security cameras? Could we take a look?" And unfortunately, they said their security cameras run on a 24-hour loop, that after 24 hours they were deleted unless something, like a crime or something happened where they had to keep that footage. They could stop and record it and back out of that loop. But they said they didn't see anything, nothing happened. But I found ironic that the girl, the clerk inside the store, said the only thing we've ever had around here was a bear, a mama bear and cubs across the street at the elementary school. And this was a few years prior to the woman having her sighting. So if a bear and cubs can make its way into this populated area and be seen and witnessed, why would it be out of the possibility of a creature like Bigfoot to be moving through the area and just run across the road in front of a car, or in this case, in the back of a car?
Do you know if any other reports have been made in that area of seeing something there?
We've received other reports over the years. When that report happened in 2009, we didn't get anything else, and we put out flyers and we put out the word through social media and stuff like that, trying to, elicit some people to come forward. No one else came forward with any other reports, but over the years, we've received reports within a 5 mile range of where she had her sighting. And yeah, people have seen them walking on the edges of like a patch of forest, real close to the major highway that runs through that area, or even, as I mentioned, even outside of town, Uniontown, they've seen them just on the outskirts of nature and right where population meets.
I interviewed someone once that talked about an old report of some UFOs coming over and Bigfoot, being associated with them in that specific area. You're probably familiar with that story.
Oh yeah, Stan Gordon is a longtime friend of mine and a mentor. He's a UFO researcher and a Bigfoot researcher, and he's been investigating these cases and reports going back almost 65 years now. And during the outbreak of 1973-74, throughout the Chestnut Ridge in southwestern Pennsylvania, there were hundreds of Bigfoot sightings, hundreds of UFO sightings reported, and there were even cases where the creatures were seen at the same location at the same time, or within hours or days of each other. Someone would see a UFO, and then a couple of days later, Bigfoot was seen in that vicinity. So yes, I'm very familiar with several cases that have occurred over the years where strange lights in the sky have been seen, and then a day or two later, a Bigfoot's been reported.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal. That was a lot. There were a lot of different people that saw various things with that one. Have you ever seen a UFO yourself?
Um, I- it's hard to answer because I've seen things in the sky that I can't equate to helicopters, blimps, drones, airplanes, nothing like that. In January 2023, even in my own backyard, as I mentioned earlier, I have a Pomeranian. I have several dogs, and I work from home. So on my lunch break, I took the dogs outside up on the hill behind my house, and just kind of standing around watching the dogs. And I have to keep an eye on them because they're all small dogs. We have hawks that circle our neighborhood, often looking for squirrels and rabbits and different small animals. And they've been known to go after small dogs. So I'm always watching this guy when they're out, just making sure they're safe and there's nothing around to make us go back in the house. And in that January in 2023, that day, I even have video footage of it that I collected on my iPhone. I was standing outside and I was just happening to look to my, I want to say my northwest position, and I saw, I can only describe it as something white and wispy moving through the clouds. And I thought, oh, that's kind of weird looking, but it doesn't look like a plane. What is that? And I watched it for a few more seconds and it disappeared into a cloud bank. I thought, well, if it's going to come out, I want to get it on my cell phone. I have my cell phone with me. So I started videotaping. And about the 30-second mark of this minute and 30-second video, sure enough, this white object, shiny looking object. And the only thing I can equate it to is the Tic Tac video that people are familiar with now that the Navy has captured in 2017, I think it was. But this white object, and it was pretty distant, appeared from the cloud bank. It didn't seem to have any wings to it, no contrail or jet propulsion from the back, no trail. It was silent, didn't make any sounds. I watched it, I filmed it probably for 10 to 15 seconds, and it went to another cloud bank to my right and disappeared and never came back out again. Um, I live probably about 35 miles from the Pittsburgh International Airport, and this is always an area known for helicopters and planes and large jets, private jets that fly towards the airport. So we see them all the time, and you can always see the wings on them. Even if they're thousands and thousands of feet up, you can still see wings. Whatever I saw in January 2023, it didn't have wings on it. I have no idea what it was. I can't say it was a UFO because if we're talking about an alien craft, I can't say it was that. It was something in the air that I just can't identify.
Yeah, that's the thing with UFOs. Oftentimes it may be something just normal, but we can't identify it. So we don't know what the origin of it is.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. I
Mhm.
shared it with some other UFO researchers, and I had a friend of mine that's really experienced in enhancing videos and looking at videos and stuff. And I sent him the file from my phone, and he blew it up and slowed it down and enhanced it and stabilized it. And even looking at the video footage that he sent me back, it doesn't look like a plane. It looks like some kind of shiny metallic object, and that's all I can say. It doesn't look like it has wings on it. It doesn't look like it has a rotor or propeller and a blimp. Like it was moving way too fast. So I don't know what it was. And that's probably one of the best, if you want to call it a UFO sighting, I've had.
Well, it's more than I've had. So I did see an orange light one time, but that was the only thing that I've actually seen. There were some animal mutilations, three of them in various fields close by. However, that orange light, I don't know if that was related or either. It's just an unknown, but it
Mhm.
did behave a little oddly. So. Well, Eric, I so appreciate everything that you've shared with us today and all of your hard work going out there and doing the research on Bigfoot. And I hope you one day get to discover the ultimate experience by seeing a Bigfoot safely, of course, and you can come back and report that to us.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to do that. Um, I've gotten to the point now in my life where I'm not trying to prove the animal exists to anybody. I just want to see one for myself so I can finally prove to myself that 29 years of field investigations, 45 years of study hasn't been a waste of time.
Well, I think that it hasn't been a waste of time, and even though it might feel like it has, but yeah, let's hope that some evidence comes out and we can get that to the public so it's no longer elusive, but we actually know it's a Bigfoot, and we might even find out exactly what it is.
I'm hoping that day comes soon.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I want to thank the audience for joining us. And I would like to remind everyone to please, please, please subscribe to the channel. Let's keep this channel going.